I have a sweet project to wrap up the holiday season for this year. Time to get to work. Today I'm going to make a fence out of these. Years ago, I had these Gingerbread Men cutouts made with the intent to do a Christmas event. Due to different reasons, that event never happened, and I've had these things sitting around for the past 6 or 7 years. I don't just have the Gingerbread Men cutouts, I also have tubs and tubs of pre-cut parts that I can use to make many different combinations of unique designs. To make these guys into a fence, I first need to build a jig. The jig will be used to consistently embed attachment points into the backs of each Gingerbread Man. When the fence is assembled, there'll be a fence post between each Gingerbread Man that will hold everything together. I'm not going to explain point by point each part of how the jig is built, mainly because the jig isn't the focus of this video. Making the Gingerbread Men is the focus. These tabs with the holes in them are the registration points for where the attachment points will be embedded into the backs of each Gingerbread Man. I'm going to install a piece of plywood in this jig. These tabs are for bolting the wood down. To make this project a bit more festive, I had it powder-coated green with splashes of red. Last step is to cut the wood out, however, I did the final assembly off camera. Now it's time for me to make the wooden skeleton for the Gingerbread Men. These pieces of wood will give the Gingerbread Men rigidity, as well as give me something solid on which to secure the attachment points in place. These squares will have a T-nut embedded in them. I need to drill holes in them so that they'll lay flush. Next, I have to figure out exactly how they'll fit and use my router to clear a channel for them to fit into. For this step, I'll be wearing this mask to protect my eyes and lungs from styrofoam particles. Well, it fits perfectly. Here's my jig, all finished. Isn't it party? Next I need to embed the blocks of wood with the T-nuts. I do this by bolting them to the jig and pressing the styrofoam into the block of wood. This will leave an impression in the foam. Following the lines from the impression, I cut out the shape in the foam. Now it's time to put everything all together. After placing a little glue, I screwed the skeleton pieces to the wooden blocks with the T-nuts. For this step I'll be using lavender foam glue and activator from 3M. I'm not sponsored by any of the products or tools used in this video, it's just what I'm using. I spray the glue on both halves of the Gingerbread Man cutouts and lightly mist them with the activator. This makes the lavender glue basically a contact cement for styrofoam. I used the guides on the jig to line up the two halves and press them together securely. The screws ended up sticking out a tiny bit on the other side, so I ground them down. For the next step, I had planned to pour some expansion foam into the area where the wooden skeleton is to lock it into place with the expansion foam. However, the foam thickened up too quickly and I wasn't able to get much into the open area in between the two gingerbread men halves. Now it's time for the main event, shaping and detailing the gingerbread man. I'm going to start by getting my design traced out, and then I'll start shaping the foam. For this guy I'm going to go with making him look like a relatively traditional gingerbread man. Now that I have my design locked in, I'll start shaping him by rounding all of the edges and giving him the look of cookie dough that expanded as it was baked in the oven. To get the flat pieces of foam to fit the now curved surface of the cookie man, I would trace out the shape of the contour of the piece that needed to be cut, and then I would cut the curve out. Once it was cut out, I would glue the leftover piece that I just cut off onto the top. This way both sides would now have a curve that is close to matching the shape of the cookie. After I got the shape to where I liked it, I'd glue it on with the hot melt glue, and my glue gun on the low setting so that the heat from the glue won't melt the styrofoam. The two buttons on his chest were the easiest to do because the contour from the edge of the cookie didn't affect the center at all, and I only had to glue the flat surface to a flat surface. With everything shaped how I liked it, it's time to move on to patching any gaps or defects with plaster. It was a bit difficult to cut the contours of the cookie into the decorative pieces, and the cuts didn't always perfectly match. That's okay though, because I can use the plaster to seal up any gaps, which will make things much easier on the hard coater. After leaving the plaster to dry overnight, I sanded everything down nice and smooth, and blended any edges of the plaster into the styrofoam. Now that I have everything sanded, I'm going to coat all the details on the front of the cookie with a 2-part plastic called Onyx from Smooth On. I'm doing this to further make things easier on the hard coater. The Onyx will seal everything and make it so that the hard coater doesn't have to lay down the polyurea too thick. If the poly gets laid down too thick, it could lose some of the details of my sculpt. Now, for the final step, the paint. I start by primering the whole thing with a plastic primer from Rust-Oleum. Paint in general doesn't stick to polyurea, and this primer is the only thing that I've come across that works well enough. With the primer dry, I move on to painting them with a nice golden cookie color. After the cookie color dried, I moved on to painting one of his buttons and his bow tie a wintry green. I painted his second button a fun purple to add some extra color. To include even more color, I painted his eyes a nice pale blue. Lastly, anything that has not yet been painted gets 2 coats of bright white paint. I bet y'all forgot that this is supposed to be for a fence and that I'm not just making a cookie for cookie's sake. Normally, for these fence posts, I'd make a fancy jig that I could drop the parts into, but after a long year of making videos and projects, I went the simple route on this one. I simply cut little blocks of wood that raised the tabs to the halfway point of the round tube. Then, I carefully measured everything and just welded it together. For this part of the project, I made 3 different types of fence posts. I made a middle post with tabs on either side, I made an end post with tabs on only one side, and I made a corner post with tabs at a 90-degree angle from one another. I got the posts powder coated, but unfortunately it was raining the day that they were powder coated, so I couldn't record. And here he is. Or rather, should I say, there they are. I went a little cookie crazy, and I ended up making 4 of these guys. I actually had quite a bit of fun working on them. That's probably due to the fact that I was able to work on most of them off camera, and I could just work without having to worry about camera angles, as well as I could refine my process on the extra cookies, and then hit record when working on the one that I made for this video. This way I didn't have to figure out what I was doing as I was recording. Also, I got to be genuinely creative in coming up with the different designs for each one of them. I also invited Mrs. Squirreland over, and she got to design 2 of the cookies. Her cookies are the one with the red belt and the one with the purple scarf. I originally came up with the idea for these as a fence that would lead up to Santa's house, but as I said earlier, that event never ended up happening, and I didn't see a point in continuing this project. The tabs on the fence posts were laser cut by a local metal fab shop, and I designed them so that the holes were elongated. This way there was some play in the bolt holes, and if the terrain that the fence was on wasn't even, it would be able to adapt to the uneven ground to an extent. With that, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Winter Solstice, Happy Festivus, Happy whatever you do or don't celebrate, and I'll see you next time.